And tonight with the Quran in the toilet. The Quran, of course, is the Muslim holy book, and any kind of mistreatment of it is deeply offensive to devout Muslims. But twice last fall, someone left copies of the Quran in public toilets at Pace University in New York. Just 4 days ago, police using surveillance pictures tracked down a suspect. He is Stanislav Smulovich, a 23-year-old Ukrainian immigrant who was a student at Pace last fall. He is now accused of criminal mischief as a hate crime. According to the police report, Smulovich told them he was angry with a group of Muslim students after a recent disagreement. Well, his prosecution raises all sorts of questions about the definition of a hate crime, the limit of free speech, and if some people are too worried about offending Muslims. Best-selling author Christopher Hitchens asked that very question in a piece for Slate magazine, saying, "Nothing repels me more than the burning or desecration of books. But when I check into a hotel room and send my free and unsolicited copy of the Gideon Bible or the Book of Mormon spinning out of the window, I infringe no law except perhaps one concerning litter." Christopher Hitchens is also the author, "If God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything." He joins me now, along with Ibreham, the National Communications Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Good to have both of you with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mr. Hooper, I'm going to start with you tonight. First of all, university officials called this nothing more than vandalism, but after pressure from Muslims and Muslim groups, that was elevated to a felony hate crime. I want to put up on the screen what the definition of that is in New York State. It states hate crimes do more than threaten the safety and welfare of all citizens. They inflict on victims incalculable physical and emotional damage and tear at the very fabric of free society. Can you tell us tonight where any physical damage was done or emotional?
Well, first of all, this person didn't do it to his own copy of the Quran. He stole Qurans and did it in an act of intimidation. If he had done this in his own home or, on the public square as an act of some perverse free speech, nobody would care. We get, reports all the time of Qurans being desecrated. But when it crosses the line from free speech to acts of intimidation, that's when you get into a hate crime.
But who was he intimidating by his actions?
He was specifically targeting the Muslims on the campus to intimidate them, and we have actually had reports to our New York office that Muslim students have withdrawn from the university because of the hostile atmosphere created by not only this act, but other acts of hate.
All right, let's bring Christopher into the discussion now. You don't think this is a hate crime. In fact, you went so far to ask the question in your piece, quote, "Why are we so scared of offending Muslims?"
Yes, well, the two things are very much connected. First, contrast the semi-literate language of the statute you just read out from New York State to the very lucid and beautiful language of the First Amendment to our Constitution, which guarantees the right of freedom of expression. That may very well involve, and in fact was designed to protect, criticism of religion. It may be expressed in a very vulgar manner in this case, but if I don't like a book by James Joyce or Karl Marx or Ayn Rand and I decide to spit on it or hurl it around, it's not the sort of thing I'd be likely to do, but it's nobody's business legally.
But if you take that same
not
book,
a hate crime. It's not a hate crime. It's nothing to do with intimidation.
And use it as an act of intimidation. I'll give you an example. Someone sent us video of a Quran, being shot. That wasn't a hate crime, but that same person took the Quran that was shot and threw it at the door of a Tennessee mosque in an act of intimidation. That's when it crosses the line into a hate crime.
It's not. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, Mr. Hooper. I don't see where that's an act of intimidation. It may be.
When you go to
extreme.
A house of worship and intimidate them
I
using
suppose
desecrated
I'll have to just
text?
wait my turn.
All right, but let's Christopher, bring it back to Pace University.
I think I'm sorry.
You're saying there's no evidence that those students.
Ms. Zahn.
Yeah.
Ms. Zahn, I'm sorry. I thought that question was for me.
Well, carry on about
from you, not from Mr. Hooper. The second thing is this: as the leader of an American Muslim lobbying organization which defends, for example, people like the crooner Cat Stevens, who under the name of Yusuf Islam has publicly called for the murder of a novelist now living in New York.
He never did that, and he has explained that.
Mr. Hooper would be much better employed in attacking what really is intimidating, which is the awareness among everyone in this profession, including CNN, which told me last year that it wouldn't run the cartoons from Denmark because it was afraid for the safety of its bureau chiefs. Let's see where the real intimidation is coming from. As long as this kind of thing is licensed in the name of religion, Mr. Hooper, you're going to have to expect that people can also be offended. You won't just be the only one to say that you're shocked or upset. Some people will say that they are fed up with religious bullying, and it's high time
by the way,
they did, and high time you got used to it.
Mr. Hooper, don't you acknowledge in the wake of 9/11, there are a lot of Americans who are afraid to cross Muslims?
Well, I think we should treat every incident equally. If there was a Bible that was desecrated...
But you didn't answer the question.
What? Well,
do you think
I
Americans,
understand.
by and large, are afraid to offend Muslims?
I think people should not offend each other, no matter what the faith they are. I think we should try and get along and not cause as much problems for people of other faiths.
I know, and every day in Iraq, mosques are blown up, not by Christians or atheists
I'm not
or Jews.
in Iraq.
Every day
I'm
in
not
Iraq, they're blown up by other Muslims, and your
And we've
organization
issued
doesn't
countless
protest about it.
condemnations of those kinds of
All
acts.
right, gentlemen, I want you to stand by because I'm going to bring you back into another part of the discussion. Christopher Hitchens, Ibreham Hooper, please stay right there. I want you to hear what my next guest has to say and come back to you for more reaction. We're on the top of intolerance against Muslims. I want to talk about a controversial word that you probably heard over and over again in relation to the war on terror. Islamophobia, defined by some as undue fear of Muslims. But is it racist to fear an entire religious group? Radio talk show host Dennis Prager says absolutely not, and he explained why in a provocative column that is making news today. And he joins me now from Los Angeles. Welcome back, Dennis.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. So let me read just a small part of what you wrote so our viewers know exactly what we're talking about here. One can rightly or wrongly fear Islam, or more usually aspects of Islam, and have absolutely no bias against all Muslims, let alone be a racist. How can you say it's not racist to fear an entire group of people?
Well, that's the point. The brilliance of the term, and that's the title of my piece, that it's a brilliant term, Islamophobia. Remember, it means fear of Islam, not fear of Muslims. See, there's anti-Semite, there's racist, that's fear of people or hatred of people. Islamophobia was a brilliant term because it meant that any criticism of Islam, not of Muslims, but any criticism of Islam is equal to racism. And I gave example after example where they're lumped together. But Islam has nothing to do with race. You might as well say that anybody who has fear of conservatism is a racist, or fear, conservatism phobia, or liberal phobia. Anyone who fears liberalism is a racist.
Would you be
offended? But nobody would say that. It's absurd.
Would you be offended if someone used the word Jewophobia?
Judaism phobia would be fear of Judaism, but they don't use that term. There are people who may not like Judaism. There are people who could say anything they want about Judaism. That's my religion. It's criticized. Christopher Hitchens criticized it in his book. I don't think he has an anti-Semitic bone in his body. But that's the whole point. But if you criticize Islam, you're considered to be a racist. But if you criticize Judaism, nobody thinks you're a racist. That's the point of the brilliance of the term. That's why one of the many reasons you can no longer criticize only one group. For example, to use the theme that you were using before, if you have a Quran in the toilet, which is disgusting, absolutely and reprehensible, that's all of a sudden a hate crime. But if you have a crucifix in a man's pee, piss Christ, that's at galleries and museums, and a man makes money on it. Which gives you an idea, because there's no Christianity phobia, but there is Islamophobia. And so the word and the intimidation have been very effective in intimidating any equal reaction to the religions.
If you believe this intimidation is for real, do you think it is succeeding in suppressing criticism of Islam?
It's almost a rhetorical question that Christopher Hitchens mentioned earlier about CNN or any, and it's not. I'm not picking on CNN. It was true for Fox News or anybody else. Nobody showed the cartoons in the United States. I think the Philadelphia Inquirer might have been the one exception. That was one of the most newsworthy things. Yet no newspaper had a problem of showing the Virgin Mary surrounded by cow dung. It's a non-issue. Or for that matter, the crucifix and urine. Those are okay. Or Newsweek puts the Jewish Star with machine guns in it when it didn't like some Israeli policy. Nobody at Newsweek was afraid that Jews are going to blow up Newsweek, but people are afraid that they will be blown up by Muslims. Radical Muslims, Islamists, whatever term you wish to use, they're afraid they will be blown up by only one group of religious people on earth at this time.
I want to bring Christopher Hitchens and Ibreham Hooper back into the discussion. Mr. Hooper, let me put up one more line from Dennis's column today where he writes, the term Islamophobia has one purpose: to suppress any criticism, legitimate or not, of Islam. Do you buy that?
No. Mr. Prager sets up a false premise and then tries to defend it. First of all, that the use of the term is an attempt to suppress criticism. No one's saying you can't criticize any faith, discuss things openly, be critical of certain beliefs. But what we're talking about is hatred of Islam and Muslims. And we don't, again, the second part of his false premise is that we call it racist. Islam is an ideology. It's not a race. You can be a bigot. Maybe we should discuss whether Mr. Prager believes in anti-Muslim bigotry. But I mean, we get on a daily basis things like kill Mecca monkeys, Islamo-Nazi ragheads. A message on a website supporting Mr. Prager's column said Muslims are Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda are Muslim. Let's be done with it and kill them all. Is he now ready to repudiate Robert Spencer and Jihad Watch, one of his top supporters?
Dennis Prager, a quick answer to that, and I got to get Christopher into this conversation.
Jihad Watch is one of the most honorable websites that I know of monitoring jihad in the world today. No, nobody says
do you
kill all
defend that
Muslims.
kind of language,
Who says kill all
Dennis?
Muslims? What do you think? It's despicable. Of course not.
All
I mean, it's absurd.
Christopher, fear isn't exactly the same thing as hate. Christopher, isn't it possible to fear Islam or some aspects of it and be free of hate and not be a bigot?
Well, phobia, I think, as well as meaning fear, does imply dislike, and I dislike Islam as I dislike all religion. I'm just astounded there by the turn the discussion has taken. Every day, all the time, we have to hear propaganda pumped out of radio stations across the Muslim world, telling children to kill Jews, telling children to kill Hindus, telling children to kill Christians, telling them that their sisters and mothers and aunts are inferior, telling them that homosexuals should be stoned. We have to read and claim not to be offended about the stoning of 10 people in the Islamic Republic of Iran in the last week alone for crimes that they did not commit. There would not be crimes except under the mad religious laws that Islam proposes. Mr. Hooper has to get used to this idea. Some of us find that offensive too, but we don't demand that he be shut down or be prosecuted. We put up with his self-pity. We put up with his rantings and his distortions because we believe in the First Amendment. All we ask in return is that he upholds. All we demand in return is he upholds the First Amendment too.
We love the First Amendment. We uphold it every day. And the First Amendment also protects free expression of religion, and when you engage in acts of intimidation against a religious group, that goes against the First Amendment.
Dennis Prager, you get the last word tonight.
You haven't read, you have neither read nor understood the First Amendment, sir.
Mr. Hooper said that he welcomes criticism of Islam. Can one say that women, as a rule, are treated better in the Western world than the Islamic world? Is one who says that, is that person an Islamophobe?
No,
yes or no?
we discuss that issue every day.
So one can say that. So one can say that and not be accused.
Again, you set up a false premise. We discuss that kind of issue all the time.
I asked that.
And by the way,
really?
the website that Mr. Prager is defending, the website that Mr. Prager is defending says that we should make the life of Muslims in the West so difficult they will leave.
Gentlemen, I've got to leave it there.
That I don't agree with. I do not agree with that
Well,
sentiment.
then tell Mr. Spencer
record.
that.
I wish we had
will.
more time to continue this, but we don't. Christopher Hitchens, Ibreham Hooper, Dennis Prager, thank you all.
Thank you.